All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us once again. This is IEPPV and F64 Live. We are doing the IEPPV Photojournalist program of the year. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking with our guests, Peter Levshin, Frederick Van Johnson, Steve Brazill. I myself might interject a bit of information, but for the most part, we're going to talk to these gentlemen. They all function in photojournalism in a different way. They've had some experience in photojournalism, so we're going to have a interesting discussion with that. As we get into this, I would like to introduce Steve Brazill. We're going to talk to you first. Live concert photographer, radio personality, Raz on KCOW. And anybody wants to find you, they can look for you by searching Steve Brazill, like Brazil with 2 L's, right?
Oh boy, did you rehearse that? Wow.
No, tell us a little bit about yourself real quick as we go through this so people understand what your experience is.
Well, I'm like Troy said, I'm a live music photographer. I've got about 40 years in radio. I started in radio in 1979. And so I've been doing that for a long time, and it's through radio that I do concert photography. Also a podcast host. I host Behind the Shot, which is on hiatus right now, but hopefully it'll be back at some point in time. And like he said, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Steve Brazill. On Facebook, you got to add the word photography, Steve Brazill Photography.
Perfect. And our next
former IEPPV board member, if you haven't met me at IEPPV.
Right. And continuing consultant. We always need input from Steve on things. Peter Levshin, my good buddy over there, the Australian world traveler extraordinaire. You have been many places. You've been recently to Papua New Guinea. You just did a interview with Frederick about your trip there. So if people want to check that out, they can go to thisweekinphoto.com and they can find that. You've been to China, Russia, Burma. Where else have you been?
Yeah, a lot of places. Next question.
You're also a member of the the Press Photographers Association of the Greater Los Angeles area.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And you print their book, right? You print what is that?
Actually, this book, it comes out once a year. It's the annual highlights and image winners and so on. This association's been around for a very, very long time, at least 65 years. Press photographers have been taking photos in Los Angeles for a long, long time. I said ever since there's been newspapers in the city. So some of their work is outstanding. It's really good. I got involved in, photography probably about 8-9 years ago, seriously. And it's only been the last couple of years that I've really, tried to take better quality photos and, travel all over the place and try and get really good images. And Troy has helped me out, and the other 2 guys, Frederick and Steve, are outstanding photojournalist photographers. And one day I'd hope to be as good as those guys.
Nice plug. Nice, good. Thank you for that, Peter. And then, of course, not last but not least, is Frederick Van Johnson, who you guys have seen on a couple of our image critiques and our software class. 8-year Air Force combat photographer, right? Mm-hmm. So, of all of us, I think that you've had the most challenging and frightful experiences in photojournalism, and that's going to be interesting to hear some stories about that. You're the host of thisweekinphoto.com, TWiPPro.com, and you've photographed all over the world. You work for Apple and Yahoo and more, right? So, but we're focusing on photojournalism today. Tell me a little bit about you and your experience in photojournalism and where people can find you and stalk you a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that gracious introduction. It just makes me sound like I'm really old. That's what it sounds like. Like you were photographing back in the Cretaceous period.
I didn't say you started in film. I could have done that.
I did start in film. And in fact, I started in the military. We were rolling our own film back then. So if you can believe that. But yeah, so yeah, everything that you mentioned is mostly true. What I do now is, so just to put a fine point on the pencil here in terms of me calling myself a photojournalist, I would consider myself a previous photojournalist. I was a photojournalist in the Air Force, like you said, for 8 years, a combat photojournalist. But I haven't shot professionally as a photojournalist since I left the military. So for many, many decades. But if you ask me what genre of photography I categorize myself as, it would be into photojournalism. So to that end, Steve and Peter are active shooters in the photojournalism genre, and I'm more of with This Week in Photo, more of a spectator or a pundit about that kind of stuff. Although I do shoot, these guys are out there, eating bugs in Papua New Guinea and getting sweat on by rock stars. So it's it's a little different. But like you said, yeah, for me, I've been on the internet since the beginning of the internet. So you can find me at Frederick Van. If you just Google Frederick Van, everywhere I am will come up. And if you want to go straight to This Week in Photo, like Troy was saying, thisweekinphoto.com is my sort of Rome where all roads lead into it. So
very cool. Very cool. And many of you know me. I'm Troy Miller. I am a wedding photographer. So in the sense of photojournalism, I have the freedom of editing my images, but I'm often in a situation where I have to deal in a photojournalistic style. I can't change things and move things around. And we're going to talk about that kind of topic here in just a little bit. But to give a little bit more context where we're going to be going with this, I'm going to show some images. And, Steve, just briefly, what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to start with you, is let me know what's going on in this image.
Oh, this will be fun. Watch, he'll put up one of Frederick's.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
That would have been good.
That would have been
one of Peter's. Well, it's somebody on a bull, and yeah.
Man, see, I just want to make this good. I'm just too worried about screwing it up. I didn't think to be clever. So, but in the context of our discussion, and I think that it would be good for all of us to kind of see what you work in and what your environment looks like, and the challenge that you have to face in that world of photojournalism and being able to get these shots. So if you could tell me a little bit about this one. I know this is titled Not Mick Jagger because it looks like Mick Jagger, but
it hasn't come up yet.
You don't see that?
Nope, we don't see it.
Oh.
Well, wait, if you talk, I'll pretend that you don't look like Mick Jagger.
Okay, well, see, that's exactly what's going to happen is I'm going to be trying to show stuff.
That's definitely not Mick Jagger, yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to show. Here we go.
I mean, your wife thinks you're as handsome as Mick Jagger. Don't misunderstand me. I don't mean to rain on that parade.
Now we're going.
There we go.
There we go.
So, this is, for those that are here from IEPPV, you'll know the venue because you're in the Inland Empire. This is the Glen Helen Amphitheater out in Devore, where the 15 and 215 freeways meet. And the band is Cage the Elephant. This is from last fall. This is Cal Jam 17. It was a all-day festival put on by the Foo Fighters. What's really cool about this festival, and they're doing it again this year actually, is it's an all-day festival. So if you look in the distance, it's one of the things that was really hard to kind of line up. But there is a Ferris wheel in the far back, and the finger's almost dead center. Not quite. But that Ferris wheel in the back is a full giant Ferris wheel that they put back there. There's two other stages that play during the day, and then at night you just have the main stage. And this is a band called Cage the Elephant. And this was actually a really interesting shoot. And one of the reasons this is one of my favorite photojournalism images of all time. When this band was going to play, I didn't care about photographing Cage the Elephant. I know their hits. Other than that, it was nothing special to me. But I photograph every band that plays anyway. And this was the highlight of the night. First of all, you think, and we were talking about it in the photo pit, that you're watching a combination of Jim Morrison and Mick Jagger together. That's how he performs. When he's on the stage, probably 30% of the time he's in the air jumping. And this was his second or third time going out into the audience. And what I love about the shot, purely going to the photojournalism end, and I had people tell me, no, before you enter this in an image comp, you should crop this really tight. crop the girl's face at the bottom and crop the people on the right out. But to me, photojournalism, more than anything, is the story. You can, I mean, doesn't mean don't concentrate on the technical end. Technical end matters, especially from an image comp point of view. But from a pure photojournalism point of view, it's all about telling the story. And if you look at this, you see rabid fans. The fact that the one girl is looking at her friend in the bottom, I love. The lead singer in the crowd. But to the right, that's me. That's the photo pit where the photographers and the security are, and you see people in there shooting. You see a guy in the distance holding his camera up over his head. It lets you know the pandemonium and mayhem happening in the crowd versus all the photographers and security watching the guy go in. The sky tells you that it's night. You can see the screen TV next to the stage and all the gear on the stage, which adds to it. It's just one of the reasons I love this shot is because it really tells the story, and you wouldn't know this if you weren't there. He starts the show in a 3-piece suit.
Very
and
cool.
After a song or two, he leaves and he comes back in just the vest, shirt, and pants.
Well, let me ask you a question. When let
me just add this. By this point, all he's wearing here is pantyhose.
Well, he has a belt, yeah. So when the concert is going on in a photojournalist environment like this, did you anticipate him to come up there, or did he jump up there and you had to look at that and go, "Oh my gosh, I want that shot. I need to be there and get that"? Was it something you anticipated, or something that you saw happen and then you went after it?
You never know which bands, if you haven't shot them before, will. This band, I knew that they go in the crowd. He had gone in once, and I was in the wrong position and couldn't move. There was no way for me to get there and get a shot. By the time I got there, everybody was surrounded around him. For this one, I was watching for him to go a second time. And as soon as he went, this was actually, I think, the third time. As soon as he went, I'm like, okay, this one I'm going to get. And I broke some concert photography rules kind of doing this one. He is standing on the barricade between the pit and the audience, and we're not supposed to stand on that. And he had gone into the crowd twice, and a bunch of other photographers climbed up on the barricade around him, and nothing happened. So, but it was always somewhere I couldn't get. So when I saw him going for this one, I went, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I want this shot really, really bad. I climbed up on the barricade. I snapped 2 shots, jumped down, immediately had a hand on my arm telling me, don't ever do that again or I'll get kicked out.
Right.
Nobody else ever had that happen. I just happened to pick the wrong time to do it. But I knew he was going there. This was an intentional, concept to shoot both the crowd, him in the middle, and the pit.
Right. So one of the aspects of photojournalism, and the reason that I asked, is that being aware of your surroundings, knowing where you are, knowing what you're doing, and potentially waiting and anticipating for that moment. So this is another one of your shots, and I know that you've entered this one before, and I know that you participate in MMA and you photographed them before. You're outside the ring. I'm assuming that the ropes can get in your way. You can't move around too much. Yeah, you can't control any lighting here. What are you looking for, and how do you have your camera set up when you're doing a shoot like this? I mean, because these guys are during the fight. They're all over the place, right? And
yeah, MMA is actually one of the, in this particular case, it's actually Muay Thai. It's one of the most difficult things you'll shoot because inevitably, at least in concert photography, the band is all usually facing forward, right? With Muay Thai, you inevitably get the front of one guy and the back of another. And I like to try and get both faces to establish the scene. So for me, I shoot 100% manual. To freeze a punch, really, like if somebody hits an impact and you want to freeze that punch, deforming their face or their body or the kick, you need minimum of about 1/600th of a second. I think this is actually 1/400th of a second after the fight. But like I say, I shoot manual. It's extremely low light. You'd be surprised at a fight. This is probably 3200 ISO. I'd have to check at 2.8, maybe f4 for this one. And This one, I'm actually standing on the ring. The fight was over. I had some access because I know the people who promote the fights. So I was able to stand up on the side of the ring and shoot not through the ropes, but over the ropes for this one. And I think that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are some images that I assume as you work, you're looking at what's going on in these situations, looking for expressions. It's not just shoot and, I'm in a tough situation that's going to make the image better, but you have to wait for that. Moments before, moments after.
Yeah. And I think that Frederick, especially with what he did with the Air Force stuff, and I think Peter will agree with this. The shot that you just had up is actually, to me, a really good definition of what you want to try for in photojournalism. You need to be aware of your surroundings, but a lot of times you don't know what's going to happen, right? You're shooting a live thing that's evolving in front of you. You have to be aware of what's happening and almost predict it. So, for example, in a fight, sometimes guys hate each other. They won't walk near each other. But if two guys after a fight walk near each other, you can assume that they're going to touch gloves or shake hands or give each other a hug. And in your head, you know that's a great moment. That could be a moment. So you're ready. You're at least ready for what your experience tells you is going to happen. In that particular image, it was one of those magical fight moments to me, because if you want to bring that up again, there's something I want to point out in that image that to me is the definition of photojournalism again, which is the story. You can look at that image and instantly know who won the fight. There's no question, because the guy on the right's hand is on top of the other guy's head, not just because he's shorter. It's a clear dominance thing. The guy who's all bloody, right? You see he is beat up more, and he's not looking in the other guy's eyes. He's looking down. It's very clear from this shot how this fight went. Who won, who lost, there's mutual respect. That to me is what you want to go for. And a huge part of that is being ready and anticipating things that you think might happen.
Right. And that's one of the core definitions of photojournalism, is a form of journalism in which it communicates a story through photos. And that's one of those things that those are doing, and being able to photograph that. And that's, that I remember when you had that image in competition, we're like, man, that just looks painful. Peter, I'm going to move on to you, and we'll talk a little bit about some of your images as we go forward here. To give you guys a little heads up, I'm going to ask you some questions in a little bit about what photojournalism means to you and how journalism defines your so Peter, you've got some very different situations here. Like, your work is, you're traveling, you're going to places that you don't have control over. This is your calligrapher. Mm-hmm. Share with us a little bit about your experience and how photojournalism, meaning that, which we haven't talked about yet, the definitions and sort of the guidelines of what you're allowed to do or manipulate or whatever. But when you walk into a situation like this and you're out traveling, I mean, what kind of circumstances are you in, and what is your mindset at the time that you're looking at photos like this, or you're looking at the opportunity to capture this photo?
And by the way, Peter, I still think this is the single greatest photo journalism shot we've ever had at IEPPV.
Hey, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Thank you. This was shot in Vietnam, in Hanoi, just last year before last. And this calligrapher is about 93 years old. And what he does is he will write your name and a message on a parchment piece for you, and then give it to you. And I was watching him do this for maybe 10, 20, 30 minutes. And then I asked him, would it be okay for me to take some photos of you doing that? And he said yes. And I took maybe 12, 15 shots, available light, different poses. And in the end, I also sent him some copies of the photos, because I said I would send him the photos. And to me, photojournalism means that you don't add, subtract, anything to the photo. You can dodge and burn, and you can crop. You can change it from black and white or to color or whatever works best. But that's it. You can't, if there's, like in Steve's situation, if there's a microphone in the way, you can't take it out of the way. You have to deal with what you have. And then it's because I'm lazy. I don't want to spend, like some people that I know, 10, 20, 30 hours in Photoshop and Lightroom to do a photo. I don't have the patience, and I just give up. So to me, 10, 15, 20 minutes is the maximum I would spend on any of my photos, and basically just to get the image that I want. And what I love about this is that it's selective depth of field. It's an 85 1.4 lens, Sony. And I wanted to blur out the background because it's distracting. There's all sorts of weird things in the background. But you can see from the front where he's doing the calligraphy, the paintbrush is there, the little stamp is there, and he's sitting in that yoga position, and he's, giving me the little piece afterwards. The nicest man. He was so calm and relaxed. Just real nice guy.
So in a situation like this, and this goes to the National Press Photographers Association, they make some statements in their code of ethics, and that one is that you don't intrude on a private moment of grief you only intrude when the public has an overriding and justifiable need to see that. Mm-hmm. You resist manipulating or staging the opportunity. So in this situation, you're walking in, you're seeing something happening. Maybe as a tourist, maybe as you're just wandering around the streets, so you're seeing that. The next image is one that I really love a lot. One of the other definitions that I found really interesting, and this is also, let's see, where is this at? Right here. It's the World Press Organization. It says the contents of a picture must not be altered by adding, rearranging, reversing, and distorting, or removing people and or objects from within the frame. Now, something that I found really interesting as I was going through this research was there wasn't a clear definition of what photojournalism is. There's a lot of definitions about how they're to be presented in competitions. The competitions were really specific. But most of these organizations had code of ethics that basically said, we're there to tell a story. Don't manipulate that story beyond the truth of what's in front of you. Like this image to me is just one of those amazing images, and the cat is blurry a little bit. She's just hanging out. I'm wondering how you came up on this and understanding the photojournalistic integrity that I just outlined a little bit. How do you do this for somebody who's traveling and sees something like this and wants to step in there and maintain that, whether you're an actual photojournalist or you're somebody who says, I really appeal to those values?
Yeah. My big thing is this, that when you're taking photos of anybody in what I do, is you have to be respectful of their space, their environment, and their personal life, whether it's tragedy or not, and be respectful that don't just go in there as a tourist and take photos and then just run away. I would typically always try and talk to these people through a translator. Or this lady was selling pineapples in Indonesia, Mount Bromo, and we sat down there. She cut some pineapples up. We were sitting inside just relaxing, and the cat's blurry because the cat's moving. This is very low light conditions. And this lady, who's 80 plus again, lives on the side of a mountain and has no TV, no electricity, no nothing. And she goes to bed when it's dark, gets up when it's light, goes into town maybe twice a year to buy things, and very simple and happy life. And the trick with this was they were both looking out the window at some more tourists that were coming along in a bus, a little minivan, to buy more fruit from her. And I always ask, and if they say no, I never take the photo, move on, and respect them. And again, this photo has no manipulation, just dodging and burning and cropping, and it is exactly the way it was. I got maybe 10 photos like this, wide angle.
Now, Peter, Alex is asking, this image looks like it may have been desaturated a little bit. Maybe some warming has been added. You know, do you do that in Lightroom? Do you do like some tone adjustments?
Yep. In Lightroom, add a little bit of warmth to it. Just, you know, move the sliders around a little bit. The image on this screen here doesn't do it justice. It actually looks a lot better than what you're seeing now. It's a lot warmer. But again, you know, low light, trying to make sure that the pixels aren't falling apart, on and on and on. And, you know, typically just try and make the picture a little bit better, you know, with dodging and burning and warming. Yeah.
Right. And you know, to be fair, I mean, there's and Frederick can attest to some of this. You know, depending on where you work in photojournalism and a lot of the research that I did, every organization sort of has their rules for photojournalism. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on right after we show some of Frederick's images is how photojournalism plays in your business and plays in your photography, because as a wedding photographer, sometimes I can't manipulate that scene. So I have to think about, okay, how can I get this shot without being intrusive? Steve working on stage, you know, with artists and stuff, he can't. I've shot concerts with him. I mean, it's frightfully fast and it's really not easy. And you got 3 minutes to get out of there. Those are all things that play in with photojournalism. Peter, as you go into these situations, I mean, are you in areas that are dangerous? Are you in areas that, you know, you're looking over your back as you're photographing?
Yeah. Yeah. Been chased once with a guy with a meat cleaver, running down the road in Hong Kong, taking pictures of him and didn't realize that he was cutting up a dog. And when I got the pictures back, I'm looking at it. It's completely illegal in Hong Kong. We've been run off the road by people. We've actually had people pull shotguns, handguns, and wanted to know who we were. In Thailand, 12, 15 years ago, Bobby, Tan and I were there just taking pictures. They were having a revolution, and people coming up to us asking us, do we work for the CIA? Who do you work for?
Great.
American government. And all of a sudden they got guns and this and that, and all of a sudden the shooting starts and you run away real quick. The trick is, I mean, I like to take photos of things that people haven't seen before. And I get bored very quickly seeing the same stuff over and over. I love Steve's work. I love Frederick's work. I want to be entertained. I want to be looking at a photo and go, wow, what is that? And then look at it and say, wow, look at that old lady, or look at that young girl, or whatever, and see something completely different. Don't show me the same picture of flowers. Not that there's anything wrong with the flowers.
No, I get you.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I mean, the thing is, I want to be entertained. I want to look at, and I want to have some questions and whatever. But again,
gotta work at that, yeah.
I don't want to intrude into people's lives as you go. And I'm a bit of a joker, and I like to have fun with these people. I normally leave them either a good tip or buy them a little gift or whatever, and just basically have fun, because humans around the planet are all the same. They just want to have a good time and be treated with respect.
Right. I guess I'm the luckiest of the photojournalistic level style work, is that if I'm not happy with something, I can step in and move it. We did have a quick question for you, Peter. David Swanson's asking, what lens do you prefer to use most of the time? What is your go-to lens?
Okay.
Don't list them all. Just pick one.
2470 Sony and the 100 Sony STF, which has got that new bokeh feature, and the 85.
Right. And you're shooting all with, you've got the A7R Mark III and a couple of twos. Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
And, you know, again, it depends on the situation. I've been in situations where there's a absolutely magnificent photo in front of you, and Steve's and Frederick's from the same, and you got the wrong lens on, or you got the wrong situation, and you go, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Crap.
Yeah, but that's
something disappears.
You have to learn how to make that work, though, right? I mean, now let's imagine, and we'll get to Frederick here in a second, if you're a press photographer and it's your job to go cover an event, you've got to hold up all the photojournalistic integrity that company you work for or the contest you're going to enter in, and you still got to go make that shot.
Yeah.
So,
well, okay, look, Singapore 8 years ago, there was a window cleaner guy cleaning the windows. We stand there, we didn't paying attention, we're taking pictures of something else, and the guy falls out of a window, and he crashes to the ground 16 stories, and he crashed through a whole bunch of, tops and tenements and this and that, and we're all aghast. And nobody got that photo because we were watching to see if the guy was okay. I have a real problem with regards to if there's injury or blood or mayhem, I would run in and help the person. I just can't stand there and take photos. But the PPGLA guys, the real press photographer guys, they will take all the photos, and when they've got all their photos, then they'll go in and help the person, and it's like, yeah, okay. But again, we're all different.
Right. So that's sort of interesting. With that, I mean, let's transition to Frederick here. So Frederick, having been, a combat photographer, you and I had talked a little bit before. I mean, you're in a situation where you've got to make a decision on either your safety, somebody else's safety, and you have a job to do. How does that affect your ability to take photos in that situation for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and I think people are still trying to answer that question. It is, it's a case-by-case situational basis, and there's a million different situations that could unfold, and the only thing they teach you, or at least when I was in, they teach you, there's actually a series of courses on ethics, and you have to understand, like, when you're active duty military, or I would argue in any profession where you are charged with coming back with images of that event or that situation or that thing that's happening, that's the important thing. But if you overlay on that military, then it's kind of trifold. It's, okay, am I in harm's way? Can I get the shot while not dying? Are my comrades in harm's way, and should I get the shot, or should I help them? Should I pull out my camera, or should I pull out my gun, right? So you have to make that decision on if you're going to be part of the action or if you're going to document the action, and which one in that split second will do the best for the world in the end when you're sitting explaining why you made the decision that you did. You don't want to be standing in front of a general saying, you know what, I didn't get that shot because X, Y, and Z, when that shot could have, done a lot of good beyond you just pulling up your gun and being one of many that were engaged in that particular instance. So it's hard to just say, well, like Peter, you were saying, just throw on your camera and go help them. There's another human being, but photographers have to kind of take a Dr. Strange approach, and zoom out and look at all the different permutations of, if I don't get this shot, what's going to happen down the line? Yeah, should I help and become part of the action and shoot, or should I not? Am I doing a better service to everyone by taking and documenting the situation? But if someone is aiming a gun at you and you can help save this person's life that you're sharing a dorm room with later, of course you're going to help. But right. When it comes down to splitting hairs of, hey, am I going to be part of the action, or am I going to document the action? You generally, depending on the circumstance, err on the side of doing your job as a photographer. Their job is to shoot their gun. Your job, and the main reason why you're there, is to document what's going on. So yeah, it's tough. There's no one right answer to it.
And I'm assuming that in that situation, you don't have an opportunity to manipulate your scene.
No, you don't have the eye of Sauron or whatever to dial back time or anything. Yeah, you're in it, and you got to make the decision and be prepared to justify it later. And and I've seen it. It's like things happen, and you're like, well, I did A, B, and C because A, B, and C seemed like the right thing to do at the time, but you got no shots. You didn't get the shots. And it's different from weddings. It's different from sports. It's different from travel. I mean, it's a different kind of duress that you're under, a similar duress, but it's a different kind of duress.
Well, that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring, all of us together, because, when we have these discussions on photojournalism, there are some individuals who have this very narrow view that photojournalism is only this thing. And that's okay. But I think it comes down to, what are you doing? What is your job at that moment? I mean, if you're Steve, and I'm kind of putting words in Steve's mouth here a little bit, but if you're photographing a concert and you decide later, for your own portfolio work, I'm going to clone out a microphone or an exit sign in the background. That's something that he has the liberty to do. You never had that liberty to do that, right? I mean, because you're literally turning those images over. So
yeah, I've seen 95% of the shots I took while I was active duty. I mean, we were shooting film, and one of the bases I was stationed at was at Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is down here just north of Santa Barbara on the California coast. And Vandenberg Air Force Base is a base where it's one of the few bases where we launch ICBM test missiles from over the Kwajalein Islands.
I've been in those silos.
Yeah, I've been in there too with Russians. And so we had this thing called the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, START, and we had to, my job, that was one of my jobs, was to go down with the base officials and take photos as the Russians inspected our missile silos to make sure they were empty, because we were drawing down, basically, at the time. So, but I mean, you look at this stuff, and like at Vandenberg Air Force Base was like the main mission of the photographers down there was to document ICBM test launches, right? And get those shots. Soon as the helicopter, we used to fly in UH-1N helicopters. Soon as the helicopter hit the ground, there'd be a runner there, and we give them all of our film, and we never saw it again.
Wow.
It's off to get processed, off to the Pentagon. If it was a classified launch, now if it was an unclassified launch, then we would go back to our lab and process the film, make contact sheets, put them in little envelopes, send them to the the PA office, and they would circle the ones they want in grease pencil. We would get the sheet back and go in the darkroom, make the prints, and then deliver the print. So,
wow.
But you know,
and you had to shoot, and you had to create mentally visualizing all this stuff on the fly as you're going. No LCD screen on the back to look at, and that's dating ourselves a little bit, because I started on film. And that's an amazing discipline. If you can go out, do some shooting, go capture something, whatever it is, maybe it's your dog running through the grass, or it's like your friend's birthday. Don't ever look at the screen on the back and try to go make good photos.
Yeah, it's hard.
That is one of the great talents of photojournalists, is that they are able to make these exceedingly amazing images and never have a time to look at the back of the photo.
Right. I mean, well, and overlay on top of that, Troy, is we were shooting, like in the case of those ICBM and Titan launches and Atlas launches and all that stuff, we were shooting slide film, which is very unforgiving, let's say, in terms of its latitude. You know, I think you get plus or minus a third of a stop. In either direction, your shadows are either gone or your highlights are blown. If you don't nail it within that window, you got a roll of junk that the Pentagon is going to be looking at, and they're going to be like, oh, who shot this? And you don't even know, right?
I want to move on to some of your images.
Sure.
I've got this one. I would love you to share the story of this one, because we talked about it earlier. And for me, not only is it just a cool shot, but sticking with the photojournalistic integrity and the guidelines that you have, I'm assuming you didn't clone those jets in there at that exact moment. So that's pretty damn cool. So tell us how this happens, how you plan for this.
Well, this is at the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I think it was actually before today. It's watermark 2008, 2009, but I think it was actually before then, of course. But this was shot on film, I believe slide film even at the time. But this is an example, I think, of what Steve was referring to, of how some of photojournalism is just a crap load of planning on the front end, so that you could be in the right place at the right time to get the shot. Kind of like, Steven in the chat room will attest to that, because he shoots a lot of racing type photography, and you have to position yourself in the right place and be there at the right time with the right gear and know how to use it in order to get the shot. But it's not like you're waiting for something serendipitous to happen. This shot, as an example, they do Air Force Academy graduations regularly, and what you're looking at right here is the United States military choreographing this shot for me and all the other photographers out there. So at the very moment of the graduation ceremony's officiant saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to present to you the newest officers in the United States Air Force of America." You know, they as soon as those words come out, the band starts playing. The cadets who are no longer cadets are now officers in that very next moment, throw their hats up in the air, and the jets come over. Thunderbirds fly over with the roar that you can't believe. So you hear this blaring Air Force music playing. The crowd is screaming. All the friends and family are in the background screaming their heads off. These guys have just gone through probably the most grueling training that any human being can go through, right? They've gone through this. They made it. They survived. And now they're going to help guide the military. It all happens in a split second with those jets coming over. I lucked out because, like I said, those jets are choreographed to come over at a certain time. There could have easily been a hat in front of those jets,
right,
you know, obscuring. But, you know, I'm sitting there with my camera. I knew this was happening. I actually had 2 cameras. So I'm shooting like facial expressions and all that with a long lens. And I had this camera ready with the fisheye. I was literally right next to that guy. I think one of those hats hit me. I was right next to those guys, like a foot away from them. And as soon as I knew he was getting towards the end of his speech and getting ready to announce them, I pulled out that camera, hit the button, and let it roll. 36 exposures, and that was it, right? Wow. This was one that worked.
So part of photojournalism isn't just waiting for a lucky shot to happen. I mean, you were there, you were prepared, you knew what was happening, you're watching your surroundings, and you've got your eye waiting for that moment.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, because that's amazing.
Yeah, but the skill comes into it. There's this serendipity of, like, for example, first of all, me being able to be there, and then secondly, no hats obscuring this particular frame,
right?
And us doing our homework. We were there for rehearsals because obviously they had rehearsals of this the day before. So we were there for the rehearsals. So we knew exactly what the choreography was going to be. We did our planning at the end, and we're like, okay, you're going to be over there, Frederick, you're going to be in the front left, and you're going to be over here. You're going to get this. So the team, I think it was like me and 3 other photographers, we knew where we were going to be to stay out of each other's shots, and we knew what was going to happen. So that we lessened the chance of having that unfortunate conversation about why didn't you come home with a good shot of the ceremony?
Right. And Stephen made a comment. He says a key part of PJ photojournalism is waiting for how the story will unfold using your experience. So with that, let me move on to this next image here. Can you guys see that one? I got my yeah. Okay, my border is all funky. So tell me a little bit about this. I mean, did you wait? Did you sit there and wait for this guy to take another hit off this thing, or was this you turned around and?
No, I was turning a corner. I was coming from his left. He was sitting on a corner, and I was getting ready to turn right towards where the woman is, taking care of something, bending over in the background. So I was getting ready to walk down there. It was a group of us. We were actually on our way to get lunch or something. And I see this guy sitting there, and I'm like, how can I not take this shot? How can I not take this shot? But then, like we may get into later, it's the permission aspect of it and respecting other human beings on the planet. So I'm standing there, I'm walking by. I'm sure I'm not the first tourist that has walked through there. And this isn't a big town. I think this was Hanoi, actually. So I walk up to him. I don't speak Vietnamese, right? So I walk up to him. I point to the camera and give a thumbs up and nod my head. You know the salute, right? Yeah. And he's like, "Go ahead." He throws his thumbs up, and then he's like, "Wait. Let me get this thing going for you." And he gets it going and pulls a big old one out of there and looks at me, and I get the shot, and I keep walking. I shook his hand and kept walking.
So Peter, when you're walking the streets of Burma and stuff like that, is that how that works for you as well? I mean, do you go up to them and do you say, camera laying? Yes no,
idiot! This camera.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how you do it. And the percentage of good shots becomes very, very low. But when you get good ones, you get good ones. A quick question for Frederick. Okay, so as far as you're working for the government, do all those photos that you take for the government then belong to the government?
Yeah, pretty much. I have a couple that I was able to keep for myself. So I have a portfolio of rocket launches and things like that I have. But for the most part, I mean, I was government property, so everything I created was government property.
Right,
I mean, without question.
Arguably, you still are.
Yeah, we all are. Yeah.
Well, so the question I have is there's obviously a statute of limitation on some of this stuff. So would it be unreasonable to assume that, you know, in 50, 60 years' time, you may actually produce some really top secret, fabulous.
No, because like I said, the shots that I have, I'm happy to publish and share. In fact, a lot of them are in the TWiP Flickr group. But I'm happy to share the shots that I've done because they're not classified. But the ones that were classified, like I said, they got whisked away. I don't even know where they are. You know, I couldn't even tell you. Like 90%, a high percentage of the photography that I did while active duty is gone. And, you know, I'm probably attributed to it, probably for finger pointing purposes. But, you know, other than that, it's gone. You know, it belongs to the U.S. government.
Yeah. So sorry, Troy, get back to your question. Yeah. It is exactly the same thing. You know, Frederick and I travel around the world, different places, exotic stuff. You walk around a corner and you see a guy doing this. If you are respectful and happy and cheery and joke around and be cool, they will always be accommodating. If you turn up and be a real a-hole and, you know, start, you know, a lot of, unfortunately, the Chinese tourists that are traveling around the world step in there with their selfies and on and on and on and push their way through and do not ask permission, on and on. So a lot of, you know, places get gun shy with regards to, and they will stick their hand out for money, on and on. So to be a representative of your country and, you know, your professionalism, it's always nice to be really super nice and be respectful of the people, and you'll always get more than you bargained for.
Yeah, and look, like 9 times out of 10, I'll get a thumbs up, smile. But every now and then, and that's the one I hunt for, is the one person that gives you the no, go away, don't take my picture. Well, no, that's the one I make sure that I'm like, no, I don't want. I'm not going to take a photo. If you don't want to be photographed, I don't want to photograph you, and I just move on and respectfully wave and keep going.
So one of the other photos that you sent me, and I just love this photo. As I'm looking at this photo, I like it more and more and more. And I'm going to put it up here in a second because there's so many stories going on in here. And I think one of the things about photojournalism is that it communicates a story, right? It's communicating something visually. At the core, photojournalism is that. It's communicating a story through that photograph. And there's lots of images that do that, and a lot of the images that we've shown already do that. This one for me is really my favorite because there's like water squirting out the front. There's a dog that's like in half step looking at you. There's this woman on the back of this boat doing laundry. One of her pant legs is up higher than the other.
Yeah.
I just dig it. There's so much stuff going on in there, and at least for what we have in front of us right now, aside from Steve's not Mick Jagger from Cage Elephants, this is such an amazing story you could look at for such a long time, and keep looking and keep looking.
And it makes you, and I think for me, when I look at this shot, I'm back there on the boat taking the photo of this. But when I think of this, when I was taking this, I was like, what a life, you know, and not in a negative way. I mean, can you imagine all the trappings that we have here, especially most of us live in California, right? So all the trappings that we have in California, there's a house and we complain about cell phones, it's not fast enough, and Facebook and, you know, Cambridge Analytica doing this and government tampering and all this negative stuff that we have going on. And then you go look at this and their day is, you know, where's breakfast? Where's lunch? Where's dinner? I got to make sure my kids are okay. The dog is fed. We got to make some money. Let's go fishing and take some money to the market. Yeah. it's a completely different existence. In Vietnam, I think this was on the Mekong Delta. In Vietnam, you know, I would argue 100% of the people that I met seemed happier than most of the people I know that live here in the U.S. It was just like a baseline level of, you know, we're comfortable, we're happy, I got my family with me, I'm doing stuff, versus, you know, the weight of the world on their shoulders like we tend to have over here. So that was a fun shot. Yeah, and you're right, there's lots of stories in there. And, you know, talking to me, I could tell you even more stories, like the water that they're in and some of the things that I saw floating in that water and people swimming in that water next to those things and taking mouthfuls of water. You know, it was a great time going out there. I gotta get back out there.
That sounds amazing. I've seen lots of Peter's work, and I know that you guys could probably go back and forth all day about that experience out there. And I know some of his stuff that he shows is
well. So Troy, let me jump in 1 second. Okay, so that shot is luxury living, because they actually have a boat that they can move around to different locations, and they have the freedom to move. And that is like living in Beverly Hills.
That's a yacht. Yeah.
Those people are living the dream. I mean, that is just fabulous. And as Frederick said, the more you see some of these people that have absolutely, just coming back from Papua, they have no electricity, no shoes, no nothing, and yet they're the happiest people ever. It kind of is worrying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it makes you come back and you're like, you know, I make more money in a week on some weeks than they would pull in an entire year or multiple years.
Yep.
Yeah, yet they're happier than I am. Who's winning?
Wow. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit away from the imagery and let's talk about photojournalism a little bit as a sense of it. I mean, you know, I've been photographing a long time, and we've all had conversations about photojournalism and, oh, this guy got disqualified from his competition, or that's not appropriate to do. And, you know, what was really interesting to me is I get online and I'm like, I'm going to go find a definition of photojournalism, and there's going to be one out there, and there's not. I mean, if it is, it's buried somewhere. I mean, I went to the World Press Organization. They have code of ethics. I went to the National Press Photographers Association. They have code of ethics, but not a clear definition of what photojournalism is. And what I found, and I have to read this because this isn't stuff I can just memorize, that photojournalism was coined like in 1907, right, by a guy named Cliff Edom, E-D-O-M. Who taught journalism, and at the time, you know, photography was taking a turn. And one of the definitions that they have, and this is from the New World Encyclopedia, and it's a little bit long, but I'll just read it so it sets context. It says, photojournalism is distinguished from other close branches of photography, such as documentary photography, street photography, celebrity photography, by the qualities of timelessness. The images have meaning in context of a published chronicle recorded event. And that's pretty powerful. Objectively, I'll say it was objectivity, the situation implied by the images is a fair and accurate representation of the events they predict. Right. So if you just crop a section out of the story and you don't show the rest, you're really not doing it justice. Right. That's not really holding up to photojournalistic integrity. It says, and narrative, the images combined with other news elements, such as stories, to inform and give insight to the viewer and the reader. And of all the definitions I found, I think that one was the most descriptive.
It's close. And I'll just jump in. I think obviously all of this, including photojournalism, is subjective. But the way I would look at it is the word photojournalism is photojournalism. It means telling stories with photography, or more literally, telling stories with light, right? So we're photojournalists and we record things that happen. The destination, or for both the commissioner of the photograph take the photographer out of it, but the commissioner of the photograph and the destination and usage of that photograph should dictate how that photographer is going to apply whatever cheat sheet of ethics to that work. For example, if you're taking a photo of some sort of rally in Washington, D.C. or in a major city, then your job is to tell that story. And if it's going to a newspaper, then of course you can't manipulate that, because it'll cause everything that you've shot to come into question. It's more about journalistic integrity than it is about making the shot. But if you're doing something like what Steve does, if you're doing photojournalistic work at an event, then it's about the end customer is either the venue, I would assume, or maybe the band, or maybe some third-party entity like a newspaper or something. Depending on where it's going would dictate what you should and shouldn't be able to do to that image. So if you're doing shots, you got commissioned by, Nicki Minaj to take shots at her concert, and she just wants shots of her on stage for her book or whatever, then yeah, you're going to take, imperfections out. You're going to make her look the best that she can, and then pass that off as real, right?
Yeah. And really what he just touched on is photojournalism is more the output than the input. So in my particular case, if I'm shooting for the Press Enterprise in Riverside, I have journalistic integrity rules that I have to follow that are fairly strict now, because now you're talking about the, society of media professionals and journalistic rules.
But let me interrupt real quick, because those rules, those guidelines are set by the organization that you're functioning in, that you're shooting for.
Which is exactly my point, that the output where those pictures are going is the most important deciding factor on whether or not you're shooting photojournalism. For example, shooting a live concert, if I'm shooting for KCAL doesn't really care if I take a microphone stand out, right? They just don't. So if I put them on, they don't care if I post my artwork, as it were, rather than a photojournalistic shot. When I'm shooting for the house at San Manuel Indian Bingo and Casino, those are not photojournalism shots. Now, I'm shooting the exact same thing. Or if I'm shooting for Nicki Minaj, that is nowhere near photojournalism. Those are marketing and promotion shots.
Right.
Okay. That's a commercial shoot now. Now, I'm shooting the exact same thing the exact same way. That's why Frederick nailed it. And that is, you have to actually consider who commissioned it, where it's going. And the where it's going is the most important part, because that's what decides your rules. Most news outlets have very strict rules that are on a national level, but they may set their own, right? A small local newspaper in Rialto may go, you know what, I don't really care if you take something out. And I want to touch on one thing that Troy said. Troy mentioned in that description, right after he read the description, he said, so if there's a big rally happening in DC and you choose to only shoot this part of it and not include the other part, that's not really a realistic representation. I would dispute that 100%. And here's why. People argue that you can or cannot crop a photojournalism shot. You crop any photograph that you take based on your lens choice.
That's true.
As soon as you choose 200 millimeters over 14 millimeters, you've cropped the image, even if you don't do it in post. You are choosing the minute you put a lens on your camera and zoom to a certain zoom, you are choosing the story that you want to tell. What you leave out and what you leave in is always part of the story.
And Troy, can you touch on this? Because I wanted to piggyback on what Steve just said, and that's the idea of the mindset of the purity of photojournalism being you can't touch the image after you shoot it because that's somehow breaking some journalistic rule, and now it's fruit from the poisonous tree, right? You can't trust anything because he moved a pixel in that particular image. But I had a conversation several years ago with a photographer here. I think he's based in Northern California. His name's Steven Johnson. And we were talking about this very topic. We were talking about the usage of post-processing manipulation versus darkroom techniques before digital became prevalent, versus lens choice and film choice and emulsion choice and versus taking a step to the left or taking a step to the right to change the entire perspective of the shot that you're taking. Like, where do you draw the line? If you take a step to the left, you shifted the perspective, the whole story is different. If you put on a wide versus a telephoto, you've changed it. If you shoot black and white film versus slide versus color, you've changed it. If you import it as digital and manipulate it, you're changing it. Everything changes the image. So where do you draw the line at this is what's real and this is what's not real?
Well, this is one of the things that I wanted to address, and that the rules are not necessarily universal, right? And the interpretations that some have on these rules say, "Oh, you can't move pixels. That ruins the photojournalistic integrity of that image." And that's not exactly true, because like, for example, the National Press Photographers Association, they say editing should maintain the integrity of the photographic image, content and context, right? Do not manipulate the images, and this is where I think it gets most important, or add or alter in a way that can mislead the viewers.
Right.
Okay? So the idea that you want to clone out a bag on the ground, we could argue whether or not that misled the viewers, because you could have cropped that out, right? And the reason that this is sort of important is that because if you're going to make this idea that, oh, you chose to shoot with a 7200 and you chose only to show those protesters up there carrying the rifles, you've changed that story, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge with photojournalism. When Peter walks into a hut and there's a woman sitting there with a cat, if there had been, a rifle leaning up against the wall on the right,
that would have been great.
I know. I'm picturing the shot.
I'm always looking for rifles. But let me just jump in one sec.
Well, let me just finish my thought real quick.
Go ahead.
If that rifle was in the shot, it might give somebody an impression of what's going on in that scene as opposed to what you crop. So I'm really interested to hear briefly, because I know that it's a deep thought conversation, is from your perspective of photojournalism and the context of what those values are.
So
is it okay to crop out something that you don't?
And I want to jump in after him.
Belongs to tell the story.
Okay, so in our business, we're a publisher printing advertising. We do thousands and thousands of coffee table books, advertising. We do advertising on Tahiti beaches, and we use a swimming pool in Santa Monica. We use trees from Queensland, Australia, sand from Hawaii, put it all together and represented it as the client wanted as a destination. The only project that we do in our organization, we're not allowed to touch any of the photos, is the Press Photographers of Greater Los Angeles. When we get their job, it goes straight to the printer. There is no adjustments made whatsoever. The photos are printed as they come out, whether they're good, crappy, medium, dark, black, light, whatever. They don't do any adjustments whatsoever. So the way that they look at it is, we're not allowed to even make adjustments on press. We cannot make any adjustments in Lightroom, Photoshop, whatever. It's output from the camera, and it's printed exactly the way it looks. So 99% of the stuff that you see around us now is being manipulated and touched and moved to make whatever the message that they want to do. So photojournalism to me is pure photography, basically.
And let me, can I jump in, Troy?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So a couple of things. First of all, if you look back at photojournalism to the Civil War, there was a very well-known photographer who we now know staged a ton, most, if not all, of his battle scene photos. He would move bodies near the cannon to take shots. And that's what we see today as the photojournalistic shots of the Civil War. It's part of those reasons that some of these rules came up. But somebody touched on something when I mentioned cropping and that you crop with a camera. Stephen mentioned this. And what he said was that the crop is an editorial decision. And he is correct. It's an editorial choice by the photographer, but it's an editorial choice that still allows for photojournalistic integrity. Other manipulations that you might do ruin photojournalistic integrity, and you lose those rules, which then brought Alex in. And Alex asked a really fascinating question to me. Would blurring out a license plate or a phone number for privacy reasons in a shot disqualify the image as photojournalism if those elements do not take anything away from the story? And here's what, great question, right? Here's my answer to that. I'm curious what everybody else on the panel would think. My answer to that is the photographer should never, ever, ever blur out that license plate. He should give it to his editorial staff. The editorial staff will run that by their legal department. The legal department may say, you know, that's a personalized plate. Somebody could trace them. Let's blur it out in the photo. However, that news outlet would maintain the original copy for legal reasons. The photographer shouldn't do it. An outlet may and still be photojournalism because they've made an editorial choice for the safety of somebody, and they would keep the original photo should a legal situation arise where they needed to produce the original.
Yeah. Can I
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I'm going to address that real quick.
Yeah, so Steve's right. So to answer, from my perspective, to answer Alex's question is no, you don't mess with any pixels in the image. If there's a license plate in there, then that was, and it shouldn't have been in there, that's partly a fail on the photographer's part for including something in that shot that shouldn't have been in that shot. So don't shoot it. It's not like Troy was saying, it's not like wedding photography where you're like, oh, that's a perfect shot. That's perfect. But I can just take that license plate out later, or I could take that person out later. You can't do that with photojournalism and call it photojournalism. If you're doing, like we were talking about before, if the commissioner of the photo was that this needs to retain journalistic integrity. Of course, you can't take it out. Even Troy, you mentioned, the example of a plastic bag blowing on the ground and that being in the shot, it takes 2 seconds to clone that out in Photoshop. But yes.
Well, you're slow at Photoshop.
Right. Yeah. But I would argue, cloning it out to say that, that was not part of the story that was trying to be told. I would argue, how do you know? How do you know that wasn't, a bag that was carrying drugs, now that it's gone, it's no longer part of the story and it breaks it, right?
Bottom line is you don't push pixels.
You don't move pixels, not in this kind of photography, not in photojournalism. No. I'm a big proponent of all pixels were born to be punished, right? So move those pixels, reshape those pixels. That's why they're here. That's why they're pixels. They're not called permanents, right? They're called pixels. So you move them around and do stuff. But if the job calls for, frank reality, mistakes, and ugliness of reality and all, then that's what you deliver.
So Troy, sorry, quick question. Okay, so how do you handle the situation? I like to do selective focusing, high, like 1.8, 1.4, wide open, to get rid of totally distracting, bad,
perfect,
everything. Okay, so pixels are still there, but you can't recognize.
Right. You can't manipulate in post. If you do it in camera and it's part of the optics of the camera, obviously, or, and this is where you bring up a good point, Peter, because that's where all this AI and computational photography come in, because arguably the computer in your camera or in your phone is manipulating that image on its own and making it a better image at the time of capture. So are these devices even, reliable for photojournalism? But I would say just to make it simplistic, Peter, the idea of blurring a background, that's an artistic choice that the photojournalist makes.
That's also the face detection issue, is now you have cameras that actually focus on people's faces. And as a photojournalist in the past, you may have chosen that the story was not the face, but was the cigarette in the hand or microphone in the hand up here, and you wanted the face blurred. So all of those things are part of telling the story, but you tell the story with the tools that you have, not with anything else.
Yeah. And Troy, the last piece that I would just throw in there real quick, I know we're running short on time, but I think this is important because it's the idea of the responsibility of the photojournalist, because we're kind of skimming over that a little bit. So like Troy, you mentioned like, protesters with guns or whatever, and the photojournalist is there to document it. Depending on that photojournalist's political leanings or religious leanings or ethical leanings, he or she can choose to show that story in whatever light they want, right? It's kind of like a director can take raw film and make you cry from the same film, make you laugh from the same film, make you concerned from the same clips. You can do all that in editing and post-processing. Same thing with photojournalism. You can choose to make these bad guys on this side look like they were rebels versus just evil, right? Well, you can do that.
That brings up this question is that, according to some of the research that I did, it's all about telling the story, not misleading in any way, right? But if you go into a situation, and maybe this is more of a subjective conversation, over some beverage and snacks, but why is it, and I say this hypothetically, why is it that pushing pixels in post is taboo, but yet if I shoot with a 24-1.4 and everything a foot behind you is completely out of focus, I am, by taking the photo, manipulating the scene and the perception of that story, as opposed to doing
No. You're not manipulating the scene. You are manipulating the story. So let's take a hypothetical. You have a scene unfolding in front of you that has clearly two different sides. Let's say that it's, Group A, Group B, they hate each other and they're throwing bottles at each other, right? If you only choose to shoot one side being hit by the bottle, and let's say everybody's labeled, I'm Group A, I'm Group B. If you only show a bottle hitting a Group A person in the head, you've immediately told the story that Group B is violent.
Right.
Okay? No, but what I'm getting at is,
we all do that, but you're still capturing what's happening in front of you. Whereas as soon as you push pixels, I can literally change the actual truth of the story, and there is no alternative story.
Oh, I can do that in camera too.
You can.
I mean, and that's my challenge is that, look, I mean, if you look at the National Press Photographers Association, resist being manipulated by staged photo opportunities. Okay, I would argue, and I do this in weddings all the time, is I have no control over the ceremony happening or a situation, and I choose to grab my 24-1.4 or my 85-1.4 or a 400.2, 2.8, and I photograph them. You cannot see what's in the background. So,
but it's still there,
right?
But the challenge is, I have, by my photograph, chosen to change the context of that story by what I've included in the frame.
It's your paintbrush, right? It's your paintbrush. But I think it goes deeper than that. And the point I was trying to make was like, take for example, here in the United States, there was the whole Charlottesville issue with white nationalists and Black Lives Matter people marching, right? So you as a photojournalist, you could take two photojournalists and embed one with each of those groups and say, depending on your news organization, you could say, I need to show these people as victims, as the good guys and the rebel alliance, and they're fighting against the evil other side, fill in the blank of who. And they will come away with a compelling story that makes whoever's looking at that set of photographs think that other side were jackasses. I can't believe it. Look at this poor little baby bleeding in the street, or, whatever. They could tell the story. And that's just by the shots that they choose to take. Notwithstanding,
or publish.
And publish, yeah. So it's the editor too, but notwithstanding. So that's just the shots that they choose. In the camera, how they choose to compose those shots are artistic, right? So here's a person. I want to blur out those people with the pitchforks and the torches in the background and just show the sad face of this person in the foreground. So I'm going to use a telephoto lens.
I think that, and this is going to lead me to my next question. So, hold your breath for that. Is that according to the National Press Photographers Association, their code of ethics says Editing should maintain the integrity of the photographic image. Okay, that's the image that they've taken.
Yeah.
The content and context. Do not manipulate images and or alter in a way that can manipulate or mislead viewers or misrepresent the subject.
But that's BS. I got to call BS on that. That's complete BS.
I'm not making up the rules.
I don't think it's BS. The goal,
I think it's BS because you can't. That's saying that every time you take a photo, depending on what that camera's looking at, the context of that photo doesn't matter, and what happened before and what's going to happen after that shot is taken doesn't matter as long as that shot is integrous. It's the context of that shot in the sequence of the overall timeline of the event, which is, by definition, photojournalism. So it is documenting the whole event.
Totally agree with you. But the bottom line is, we're dealing with light and lenses and mirrors and sensors, and no matter what you do,
sorry, there's no mirror. There's no mirror in my camera, Steve. Sorry.
You know what? I mean. Troy's wedding example is, no matter what you do, you're going to have equipment between the scene and how it gets recorded. You're gonna bow it from a fisheye. There's no way to change the way that light moves through. But if you're really going to be a photojournalist, in my opinion, you have to have the integrity to A, not change the photo afterwards in ways that violate that, and B, you have to try and be neutral. If there are two sides of the story, you have to try to tell both. Now, that's hard. Yeah. Everybody has their life experience they bring with them. But the goal would be that you let the picture tell the story. You don't get involved. And getting involved is also choosing the way that you shoot it. But
I think, or the goal, the solution.
But that's perfection. That's in a perfect world.
I think the solution could also be to have multiple shooters on the scene at the time, right? So if you have an editor or a group of people that are culling and collating the images to tell the story of the overall event. These days, we don't have to leave it up to the photographer to tell the whole story. You could put a bunch of people on the scene to cover the event from every conceivable angle, and then let editors extract out the story and publish, and that's what the public sees.
Well, we're gonna move on after this.
Sorry, Troy, can I interrupt 1 second?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Okay.
Oh, Peter's still here.
Yeah, can't get a word in edgeways with these two guys. I mean,
sorry.
So look, you can't believe 95%, 99% what you see. Okay, one. Secondly, it depends on who your audience is. I mean, we have a variety of audiences for everything that we produce. And if you're a photojournalist, you're in the business of selling magazines, whatever you're doing, you're in the business of, appealing to that audience. And if you're in that situation, you can make and manipulate any photo any way you want. And it comes down to the ethics of the organization or the photographer, or whatever. If you want to avoid all this, you pack your bags, go to Papua, where all you give a crap about is if you're going to get a little bit of a fish, a little bit of a hunting, a little bit of whatever, and you don't know what's going on around the world, and you don't care. You don't care. The world's gotten so small nowadays that we get information, on, lava flows and this and that and who's dying around the world instantly. So it comes down to the audience.
But I believe that most photojournalists working for actual news outlets are ethical people who are trying to do the right thing. Now and then you'll hear about the guy who did something wrong and he gets caught.
Yeah.
So I believe that most photojournalists are trying to give photos to their editors that meet standards.
Yeah, and a lot of this is going away anyway because the whole career field of photojournalism is kind of going the way of stock photography, right? It's
right.
I mean, the LA Times has got, they had a staff of nearly 40 photographers. They have 6 now. 6.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know.
Was that a Wakanda forever?
Hey, what does that mean?
Is that Wakanda forever? I like that.
Well, I've already said this like 5 times. We're going to move on after this. It seems to me that we need a modernized definition around what is the photojournalistic integrity guidelines, because so much has been adopted from film. And in the days of film, so much was harder to do than it is today, right? I mean, I can blur out a background to make it look like I shot with a shallow lens. Now, based on our conversation, we're going to say, oh, you shouldn't do that, right? But I posed the question. We're just going to leave this hang. Okay, don't. This is.
But can I get now?
just a tease, right? This is just a tease.
Wait a minute. Is this going to be like part 2 of this?
I'm going to forget my question.
I can't come back and do this again.
No. One, I think we need a modernized version of what photojournalism is today with digital being there. Mm-hmm. And 2, maybe, and just maybe, photojournalism needs to be a photograph that we can all see and interpret the information in the scene. And what I mean by that is that if you're going to photograph somebody and you're going to do a super shallow lens and it's going to throw the background out, so I can't see that they're standing in front of a shanty, maybe that's not fair. Maybe that's the conversation of new photojournalism definitions, because I don't have the whole scene. I don't actually know.
But that's no different than dodging or burning.
But dodging and burning is one of those things that we
brings attention to your subject. The subject is the person that's not blurry.
But I'm not getting the context of where that person is standing, and that's not giving me the whole story. I mean, that's stuff to chew on. That's stuff to think about. Because one of the things that I do want to know from you guys is. One, do you trust the images that you see today? And 2, in conjunction with that, how has the values of photojournalism influenced your photography? Right? So, like, do you trust what you see out there today? Do you trust what you see in the news? And then when you go take photos in that context, how do you implement these, however you value the photojournalistic rules, however you implement them, how are they applying to your photography? And let's start with Peter, because Peter has had little airtime.
Hey, before Peter goes, no, I'm kidding, Peter.
I'm just giving you guys time to formulate.
Okay, I'm very skeptical, and unless I'm with Frederick or you or Steve taking the photo, I don't believe anything I see. And it's the same as in the memorabilia world. We got burnt buying memorabilia stuff from people, and then you find out later it's all fake. Unless I am there, okay? And to me, okay, if I see something, I go, okay, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, okay, whatever. It's not going to change my life. If I like the photo and it says something to me and it's dramatic, or it's, something about some civilization, some people, some tribes, whatever, then it's fine. My take on it is photojournalism is a trade-off of inconveniences. And when I look at it, is something has to be given up and something has to be gained. And if you're publishing your own work, fine. But if you're working for somebody or somebody else touches it, you don't know what they're going to do, and you don't know where your photos end up. And the problem with people stealing things nowadays and manipulating, you don't know where it goes. So 99.99% of the stuff that I see, I don't trust. In fact, it's probably 100%.
But just to wrap up, so when you're out photographing, you're in the back of your mind, you're still keeping some of those photojournalistic values that you've adopted over time. Yep. That I'm gonna wait for this person to move into the light that I want, or I'm gonna wait for the rickshaw to come down the road at this one moment under that tree, as opposed to going over and paying somebody $20, like, okay, hey, move the rickshaw over there.
Yeah, absolutely. If you pay somebody, then it turns into a photo shoot and becomes a portrait session. As far as I'm concerned, it has to be a good quality photograph. Okay, unless it's a shooting or something and then it's content driven. As far as I'm concerned, it has to have all the elements of a good photo, in focus or out of focus, blurry, not blurry. But it has to say something, and it has to, portray some sort of feeling or something that the viewer looks at it and goes, crap, that's nice, or wow, that's ugly, or boy, do those people look weird, completely naked.
Oh, and he's going to his Papua images, right?
Yeah,
So
but
if
yeah.
you guys haven't seen Peter's Papua images, I don't know what episode number it is, Frederick, but
Oh yeah, I think that was while you're talking, I'll pull that up.
if you were to go to the thisweekinphoto.com,
Or just go to thisweekinphoto.com and search for Peter Levshin. You'll find it.
yeah, you'll see the imagery that he's talking about, which the story of Peter being there photographing the chief and the living in all the pig poo, and I'm not going to divulge your story. I want them to go watch it because it's quite amazing.
Yeah.
So Frederick, with you, same question to you. Do you trust the media that you see out there? And then when you are photographing, I know you did that, some time ago, but that never leaves you, right? I mean,
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. The thing. That's a great question. And the thing that doesn't leave me, I think, is the resistance to interacting with the scene or becoming part of the story. I think that is the piece of me that it still has a foot in why I want to call myself photojournalistic, is if I'm doing street photography or any kind of candid type photography, I want to take what's there. I don't want to manipulate it. Even like I'm having dinner, with someone, and taking a photo of my food, I know we all hate that, but I want to take it like it is. I'm not going to let me put this garnish over here.
I'm not going to light it on fire.
I'm not, like you. I'm not going to light it on fire. But I'm with Peter. 100% of the photos that I see either posted online, especially those on Instagram from these selfie people that know how to take photos of themselves and flattering angles and all that stuff, 100% of the photos that I see today, whether it's online, offline, on a billboard or whatever, I don't assume that it's true to life.
But that's not photojournalistic use you're talking about.
Well, not even photojournalism. I'm encompassing all photography, all genres. All genres of photography. I'm assuming I don't make the assumption that anything I look at is true. But that's not a negative thing. Depending if I'm looking at images that are purporting to be telling me something that's true, like some shot that's on the front page of the New York Times is something horrific happening around the world, I'm going to assume every pixel in that is 100% true and that shot has not been manipulated. But aside from that, everything else I look at is fair game. And I'm okay with people doing angles and filters and editing and taking telephone poles out because they're doing that for me to give me a better experience when I look at the photo, unless it's purporting to be real factual news.
Right. And it's interesting because photo manipulation has been around since the late 1800s. There's historical photos of very prominent individuals that were fake. They did it in the darkroom. So, but these were released, and throughout history, these things were thought to be absolutely true.
Yeah.
I was going
Egyptians with hieroglyphics. They're probably like, you know what? He's using a special hammer, and
so when they painted the stick figures, that's because their wife said, "Can you make me look thinner?"
Well, the Egyptians, when they wanted to erase somebody, an enemy, they went in and chiseled them off the wall. They erased them from history. And something to take into consideration here is because the world is full of manipulated photos. Right. Yeah. We'll just take Instagram and things like that. And our history, our future selves will be able to look back at our history. And I wonder, we're not going to see an accurate history, right? Because we're going to look back, unless maybe in a news article, but not in the mass of images that we have, because somebody's going to remove the crane or take the power line out. And, that was really there. So historical documents are a little bit different, and maybe photojournalistically we don't all follow in that with Instagram photos and things. I think our future is going to tell our past a little bit differently than what this future for our past does.
But Troy, what happens when we have the brand new iPhone or Android phone from 2022 that knows you're taking a portrait and sees the tree sticking out of the top of the person's head and digitally removes it at the point of capture for you to make a better and pleasing portrait?
Right.
Is that manipulation?
Yeah, it's going to be a lie.
Yeah, but you won't know, especially if it does it seamless. You have no idea it did it. It just said, hey, he's doing a portrait. He's in portrait mode. There's a tree coming out of this person's head, and I know this is a face. It's got 2 eyes and a nose, and there's a tree coming out. Let me get rid of that tree. And it pulls the tree out of the shot. Doesn't tell you that it pulled the tree out of the shot. You can't tell because it's a seamless removal. And now that shot is famous and is being passed around as reality. Does that shot have integrity? And do you care? It's a better shot, right?
No, look, at the end of the day, okay, the truth in a lot of these cases sucks, and nobody cares. Nobody cares at the end of the day.
I disagree.
Right? Nobody cares. No, they don't. No one's going to look through history and say, "Wow, geez, those guys in 2018, they're so screwed up. They did this." Look,
they might though.
No, they won't.
Before we get too far away, I want to give Steve an opportunity to answer that question, and then I'm gonna show you a website that's actually kind of cool. And there's images. You can go back in here and look during the Civil War with General Ulysses S. Grant and go, that image was not real, and it was in our history books. Mm-hmm. So I think people will care. So to you, Steve. Do you trust the images that you see today and in your day-to-day?
And how does it affect my shooting?
How is it affecting you?
Okay, so first of all, as far as whether I trust things, I don't think we're all that different in that area, even though we're saying different things, because what's happened in this conversation is we're conflating so many different photographic experiences together when we bring in memorabilia and Instagram and Facebook and what the iPhone does. And none of that has anything to do with photojournalism. I can pick up my 5D4 and I can take a photojournalistic integrity shot. Or I can take a marketing shot and beat the heck out of it in Photoshop. They're two completely different things and they can't be conflated together. As Frederick said, if the photo is being used in a journalistic output way, front of the Washington Post, front of the LA Times, front of the New York Times, front of the Bazooka Gazette, whatever it is, right? I tend to believe, yes, that photojournalism shots have integrity, and I believe what they're telling me. On the other hand, are there a million shots out there that are manipulated on Instagram? Yeah, who cares? It's not photojournalism, right? That's why the standards exist. Okay, they took a person off the beach so that it was just a beach scene using autofill in Photoshop. So what? You don't have to maintain the integrity there. That's what it's for. Renee Robin will literally bring people from the studio and put them in the middle of nowhere, and I don't have any problem with that. It's not a photojournalism shot. We can't compare the two.
So how does that affect you and your photographs that you're taking? How do you apply those rules to yourself?
Depends on who I'm shooting for. If I am shooting for a photojournalism outlet, I am very strict and I don't mess with things. And I posted a shot one time of a lead guitarist, and I had a friend of the lead guitarist, and I know the lead guitarist, said to me, you should really take that picture down. He liked it on Instagram for you to be nice, but he thinks he looks horrible in it. I'm like, I love it. He goes, well, it's technically good, but he looks really ugly in it. For me, if I'm shooting for KCAL and they don't care if I remove something, they're not journalism, they're entertainment, right? It's a business of entertainment, not journalism. But for me, while I might remove a red light in a shot I post at KCAL, I won't touch humans. I don't believe in it. I draw the line. I will not manipulate a human in a shot that I do for that. For my portfolio, for a client, if I'm shooting like Joe Walsh, they wanted his neck tucked up, so I tucked his neck up. Did I say that on here? Never mind. Never happened.
But if you're going to remove a light in the background and you're not gonna edit the person, nothing in the image is going to meet the photojournalistic.
No, but again, I'm not posting it to a photojournalistic outlet.
Right, but you're.
If I was giving it to Vanessa at the press, then I would not take anything out, and I've done that. So she used some of my Seinfeld photos in the press enterprise. Those only had journalistic changes to them. Those had 100% journalistic integrity.
So the way that you're applying this is that you feel people should look like themselves, you're not going to push that so far, but you clean up the background. You're not actually changing the story. But
I have violated all the journalistic integrity rules, but it doesn't matter because the outlet doesn't need to meet those.
Not necessarily, though. And this is what is interesting, is that wherever you look, you will find different guidelines. So like the National Press Photographers.
Well, I'm saying my outlet doesn't. I know that my outlet doesn't.
You could interpret some of these rules to say, oh, you took the bright red light out in the background. That didn't change the story at all. Those are challenges that each organization and each.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I could remove those. Yeah, every organization is going to set their own. For me, I draw the line at people or at specific rules that an outlet has.
So I want to show.
And Troy, I want to just throw one little nugget in there on Steve's thing. So the type of photography Steve is doing, I appreciate the photographer going in to make it a better shot for me to look at of my favorite band. Right. So I think that manipulation, and that clouds it, but that manipulation, I think, is different than, taking a piece of trash that was blown across the street in Tiananmen Square. Right. You don't want to take that out, but you could, because that was there. You don't want to mess
banned
with it.
Photographers because she didn't like photographs that were being posted after the Super Bowl.
Right.
But the people they were photographs that were bad. They should have never seen the light of day, but the person should not have modified them if you're going to post them. Now, you shouldn't post stuff that's unflattering. I granted that, but her response is, okay, nobody gets to photograph me. That's fair.
Yeah,
but
she's paying the bills.
I do think that it's amazing because I know that I've seen Peter's extensive library of images. He comes back from Burma and he shoots 30,000 images. I love the fact of all the noise, all the mess, all the disorganization that's in that image. I love that. And I think that that's where photojournalism has a huge appealing artistic draw for me, is I love to see that the way that it was. And I love the idea that the photographer spent time to either crop or expose in a certain way, choose a certain lens that tells me their story, and we didn't build it. Now, I love the digital side, so we're just sticking to the photojournalism. I'm not drawing a line, but I love the idea when it's not changed.
I agree.
Well, Troy, just let me jump in. One of the things in my photojournalism career at taking photos is I'm lucky 95% of the time if I get a good photo. It's more luck than good management in my style of photography. I took a photo in Burma of a barber's shop, and I didn't realize until I looked at the photos later, there was a guy taking a pee in the corner.
Yeah.
And, you don't realize that until you get it back and you go, oh, wow, that is so cool. But, Steve and Frederick, it's a little bit more controlled, and that to me would be luxurious to do. It's still hard. But in my line, I take 30,000 photos, and if I get 10 or 20 that are really good, I'm a happy camper.
And no one will ever know that you took that many photos, A, and B, part of the magic of what you do, Peter, is putting yourself in the situation to get those photos. And that's the hurdle that I would argue a lot of people, myself included, have to jump over, is to get out of their comfort zone and to go to Burma, go to Papua New Guinea, go to Hawaii, shoot the lava flows, taking yourself out of your comfort zone, going to one of those locations, shooting, posting those images. Then everyone looks at the images and they're like, oh my God, you're a great photographer.
How many times have we all heard, how do I take pictures that are so amazing like yours?
Yeah.
You want to take beautiful pictures? Go to beautiful places.
Yeah, you can't put bait on your front porch and wait for them to come.
That's the magic bullet right there.
And, and look, Troy was actually a little bit wrong. It wasn't 30,000 photos. It was about 350, 360.
1,000.
No.
Yeah. I've been there, and I've had to help him back up his library.
You're killing me. You're killing me.
But to be fair, he goes through his images years and years and years after, and I'm like, what the hell is that building? Oh, that's in Russia. That's a wooden temple. And I'm like, oh my God, you got to edit those. I do want to ask you guys another question. We're going to wrap up right at 8:30 if we can get there. But I love the dichotomy of all the opinions here, and I think that the thing about photojournalism is it's really how you apply it to your work, right? And I think that that's going to come through over time. I know that Peter and Steve, they competed IEPPV in the photojournalism category. And in our photojournalism category, you can neither add nor subtract content from that image. So you can crop it out, you can do minor adjustments, but you cannot change the story from the raw file, right? So we're not going back to how it was shot so much. And those are challenges. So those two have a rivalry, which is kind of cool. I love
but I'm losing, so.
Well, it depends on which competition, because the last one, Peter did pretty damn good, and the one before that, you smoked him.
Yeah, but Peter wasn't in it.
Steve,
I did good because Peter wasn't in it.
Steve, you're a winner to me. You're a winner to me, Steve.
Oh, love you, man.
Will always be a winner.
Oh,
So let me ask. Let me ask you guys
that's so
this.
sad.
Let me ask you guys this, because we've all been photographing for a really, really long time. For me, when I started, and I'll answer my own question, and that is, how do you feel that the perception of photojournalism and how has photojournalism changed over your career, right? And I started in film. Every wedding image I took would literally fit in the photojournalism box because I could barely move people. I didn't know how to pose, so I just shot whatever was in front of me, and it was on film, and there was no post. And I didn't get to see it for weeks. So for me, I've sort of retired some of my photojournalistic limitations, right? Because I'll be like, ooh, there's no clouds in this sky. I just add clouds. That's so
really?
Yeah, it's not going.
You really want to open that can of worms on clouds with both me and Steve on the show?
Yeah. Oh, good point.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I was in Vegas.
This fast.
Oh, that's right. You were there too, Peter.
Yeah.
All three of us.
Yep.
And Frederick, remember, it was this quick. Oh, yeah, let me see what you shoot. Oh, you swapped the sky.
All right. So for
all the things to bring up, Troy.
Let's not. Yeah. Let's not keep this as an inside joke.
Yeah.
That was not my intent, by the way, to bring this up.
Oh, sure.
Frederick, I'll let you share it.
Okay. So what had happened was we were all, it was, what was it, WPPI, right?
Yeah.
It was WPPI a couple of years ago. We were all, it was post-show, I think, or lunch or something. And we were at one of those restaurants that is in that hallway that connects the convention center to the hotel area. We had all congregated to hang out and have some lunch and beers or whatever. We're all chatting there. Renee Robin came and joined us, and we were. Peter was showing work. I think we were all both of you guys were showing work to Renee. I think.
Yeah. Steve says to Renee, or says to me, "Hey, show Renee that some of your images, like that one image, right?" And
yes,
showed it.
And basically, the long story short is Renee is a compositing master.
Genius.
Yeah.
And she looked at one of Troy's images and immediately called him out on his clouds.
2 seconds.
Clouds
Tops.
not being, let's say, clouds that belonged on that particular photo.
But that wasn't the most embarrassing part. The next day, in front of 1,000 people in an auditorium, he called him out and said, by the way, this is how you make a wrong photo, and then pointed at him, and I was sitting next to him. I nearly died. I was so embarrassed.
A day that will live in infamy forever.
I will, for the sake of all of my diligent listeners all of our diligent listeners who have stuck around, I will find that image and I will show you.
And we have everybody here still.
Yeah, no, they must like what we're doing.
So what was your question again?
How has photojournalism, the implementation and because of photojournalism has changed over time, right? Like how you work within that, because some of our technology has changed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's changed how we're able to implement that. I mean, in a pure photojournalistic sense, for Frederick, it doesn't matter if he's shooting film or digital, his rules still apply. For me, because when I shot film, I adhered to photojournalistic styles much more stringently because I had no other choice. So
yeah, but what you shoot is not photojournalism. Wedding is a sellable product.
But photojournalism is, I would argue, is more than just an end product. I think it's a mindset. It's a discipline that.
Yeah, but you're not required to for weddings. Though.
It doesn't matter. Peter doesn't have to adopt photojournalism rules, but he does. He's chosen to.
Well, the reason for it is, I consider myself a dinosaur because I now look at what's happened to the industry. And in PPA and all of these associations, it's who can do the best manipulation, who's the best Photoshop guy, whatever. To me, photojournalism is about as pure and as honest a photo. If you are correct,
nailed it.
That is exactly what you are showing people. And it is not manipulated or maybe just a little bit with soft focusing, whatever. But it's as true a photograph or image that you can present to somebody and be proud of it and say, this is an honest photo. And that's what it is. That's what it is.
So it hasn't changed much.
Same.
Because you're adopting that. Okay. And that was kind of what I was kind of setting that up, knowing that mine has changed significantly over time. I tend to love the idea that photojournalism means that I'm not going into manipulating every single scene, right? I manipulate the crap out of scenes, but like this particular image here, which is the one that I got shredded over, by the way.
Oh yeah, this guy.
Yeah. There's clouds.
Hey, and let me just gloat a little bit. Or this got second place at PPA in the wedding category.
Well, you got beaten by a guy that made a fake stairwell. Okay.
Yeah, but he made a great fake stairwell.
Oh yeah, it was good. It was good.
But in the context of photojournalism, right? I don't have the skill to put this guy digitally up here on this. He's like 20 feet off the ground standing on a wall that's, 8 inches wide.
By the way, Troy,
I just didn't like the clouds.
But Troy, by the way, this is a great photo because you made front cover of PPA magazine.
Thanks for that plug there.
And they're one of two photographers on this panel that have done that. I'm not saying anything.
That's true.
Okay, we're getting a little off topic. So let's bring this back in. We've got about 10 minutes. So let's Steve, we'll start with you. Just ending thoughts on photojournalism, what you might suggest to photographers that are out there working maybe in that environment. They want to be more photojournalistic in maybe their blogs or their style of work. Some closing thoughts on that.
Again, I think the big thing is photojournalism as a choice is completely different than photojournalism as an integrity requirement, right? You got to keep those separate. If you want to say to somebody, I'm going to shoot your event with nothing but a Fuji X100 in black and white. I'm not going to, whatever I get in the camera, I'm going to give to you, and I'm going to meet all photojournalistic integrity rules. Hey, that's great. More power to you. No one is requiring you to do it. You're making the choice. I think that's great. Like Peter, it is I don't want to say it's the purest form. It sounds so bizarre, but it really is, when done properly, a really, really neat thing. However, those people who do have to shoot. I have friends who shoot for Getty. Getty is very strict. You take the picture, you color correct, you crop, and you pass it on. And some of the most amazing pictures that you'll see in big magazines are Getty images, and that's how they're processed. And I think it's an amazing thing when people do that and maintain that integrity. But that all said, I'm going to bring it to the IEPPV end or the PPA end or whatever. The fact that you took an amazing photojournalism photograph doesn't mean it's an amazing competition photograph. A good friend of mine, Troy Miller, taught me that when I first started getting into image competitions. The fact that you have an image that is brilliant, that everybody that sees it loves it, doesn't mean it's necessarily the right image for an image comp. And I'll give you an example, and that is one of my shots where there was a big bright red light in the middle of a black area. And I mean, it was giant. It killed the image. Photojournalism, brilliant shot. I love the photo, but it's not going to work in a competition. Somebody's going to go, why is the big red light there? I wish you took the big red light out, because most judges constantly forget that we can't. So for me, that's kind of it. If you try doing it, whatever you shoot, if you're a fine art photographer, a landscape photographer, it's great to limit yourself to those rules. Take a picture and tell yourself up front, I am not going to mess with this. Whatever I get, I'm going to try my hardest to stay with. It will make you a better photographer. Then later, mess with them. But it's like saying to yourself, I'm going to walk into a parking lot for 1 hour with nothing but a 51.8 on, and I'm going to take 20 good pictures. Limiting your gear, limiting your mindset, and limiting your post-processing tools will make you a better photographer. I firmly believe it.
Cool. No, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And each individual is going to have to adopt those values to their work the way they do, whether you want to be more artistic or you want to be more
exactly
absolute in how the story is told. Frederick,
it'll improve your composition too.
Closing thoughts, ideas, anything that you want to share?
I think to the topic or to the question of, has the way I look at photography or photojournalism, has it changed over the years? I would say absolutely, 100%. It has changed. It changes with the tools, and it used to be, well, the tools and the means of distribution, right? So it used to be that, like Troy, when you started, or when we all started, it was film, and you process, you get what you get. I mean, if you're good in the dark room, you could do a fair amount of manipulation, but not too much, right? You could, but then the end result was a print. If you're lucky, a few people would see it, right?
Right.
Fast forward to today, it's digital. You can shoot with a myriad of devices, and instantly after you shoot the image, while whatever you're shooting is still going on, thousands or hundreds of thousands of people could have seen that shot already. So the path of least resistance, or the path of resistance from shooting the photo to sharing it, is gone for the most part. So then it comes in, the manipulation piece of it. Like I said, when we were talking about trust in photojournalism, I don't trust photography anymore. I love photography, but I think the trust aspect of photography, because of how fast and exponentially good the software and hardware is becoming, I don't feel like trust is a trusting the images that you see is even a question that you can ask anymore. The assumption should be made, especially, going back 10 years, it should be made that this image was probably manipulated, whether it's photojournalistic or not. You should probably make that assumption, because humans, we know if we can do a thing, we will probably do a thing, right? So those manipulations, and then you go forward in time, and that's where artificial intelligence and computational photography come in, when it becomes easy for any person to just click a shutter button and the computer just does stuff to make your image better.
So this is a good reason to have a volume and to keep photojournalism alive across all platforms, so that we can get a sense, not just from one source, but from many sources.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that would really be the only way, because if we see an image, of downtown LA and there's a fire, and in one shot the crane is missing,
mm-hmm.
and in the other shots they're not, okay, that's going to help us, call that.
Yeah. It's going to take a startup to help fix that, though. I think journalistic, pragmatically speaking about the whole topic of verification of the pixels are the pixels that were there when the image was occurring.
Mm-hmm.
That's a slippery pig. I don't think you're going to catch that pig. I mean, it's gone. The cat's out of the bag. Pandora's box is wide open and has been for a decade. So I don't think trying to apply these morals and rules, and you should do this and never do that, we can believe that internally, but we know humanity always kind of seeps to its lowest common denominator. And if there's a buck in it, somebody's going to say, well, you know, I got this shot of Kim Kardashian. I can get 10 grand for it if I take that fire hydrant out. And they're going to take the fire hydrant out and they're going to make their 10 grand versus say, well, you know what, man, I wish I had moved to the left and taken the shots.
Peter, my friend, closing thoughts?
Yeah. You know what? It comes down to whatever you do, you got to love what you do, enjoy what you're doing, have fun, don't stress, and just take a lot of photos and then just end up where you are. If you like photojournalism, do it. If you like to take wedding photos, you do it. If you do whatever you're taking photos of, I would say just enjoy what you're doing and, you know, follow the rules and just have your own self-worth and integrity for yourself. But I'm just, you know, what Frederick said, the slippery pig. I always thought it was a slippery slope. But yeah, hey, whatever. And you know how I feel about pig. I love pork. But anyway, bottom line
it's not a slippery pig, Peter. It's a greased pig. Try to catch a greased pig.
Okay, sorry. I'm getting hungry now, man. Barbecue pig. No. Look, bottom line is this, that if we can have some standards in photojournalism that we can have and stay the same and do the best we can for the next 50, 100 years, I think the people down the road will appreciate what we've done because they will look at it and say, wow, those guys did a good job then. And I think, you know, take photos, have a good time, and basically enjoy what you're doing. Because if you don't enjoy it, don't bother doing it. Do something.
And be good.
Yeah.
Right? Be good. Yeah. Be good. All right, guys. So what we're going to do, I appreciate everybody being here. We're going to wrap up. For those of you who are still listening to us and watching, thank you guys for hanging out so much. At the bottom of your screens, you'll see, and maybe at the top, but there's a set of icons. There's a Q&A and a chat button. If you haven't discovered that chat button, go ahead and hit that. And at the bottom of the chat, I threw in about 5 links of some of the resources that I used in doing a little bit of research. It's vast and it's deep, and there's so much stuff out there. You know, if nothing else, I tried to be the contrarian tonight to try to just give it a little bit of you know, an angst to the conversation and be that devil's advocate. So, you know, read, do those things, make those decisions for yourself, go create some amazing work. Again, Steve, very quickly, would you give us how somebody can find you, and we'll just go around as we say goodbye.
Sure. I'm right here.
Okay, good. Perfect. Okay. And in Frederick.
No, you can find me at stevebrazill.com, Steve Brazill on Instagram, Steve Brazill on Twitter, Steve Brazill Photography on Facebook, same as the country Brazil, but 2 L's. And I answer almost anything that I get communication-wise on any of the social media platforms. So.
Yep. And Frederick.
You can find me at, well, like I said at the beginning, Google Frederick Van. You'll find lots of stuff. Some stuff that I don't even want you to find, you'll find it. And then my Rome is thisweekinphoto.com. That's where all roads lead to. And you can get to our community, the TWiP Pro Community. You can get to the TWiP School with our learning resources and a bunch more stuff that's that'll be showing up over the coming months. So
and Peter, my friend, where can somebody find you?
Okay, email Troy Miller. Because I don't want anybody getting in touch with me because I'm really busy working, trying to make a living doing other things. I don't have an Instagram. I don't have I don't have anything.
But you are featured on packartists.com, as is Steve and myself. Yep, you can go.
Yep, and you can see some of my interviews and stuff with Frederick.
Yep.
And I appreciate him giving me the time. And just a little clarification, it's Papua New Guinea is the entire island, and Papua side is the western side, which is the Indonesian side, and that's where I did that last photo shoot. Sorry.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
And for me, guys, if you want to stalk me, Spicyjello.com and Spicyjello on Instagram. And I will say, except for Peter because he's disconnected, that any of us, Frederick and Steve included, if you reach out to us, be patient, but we're happy to communicate with you. We're happy to share. This is a passion for us as well. So thank you guys. With that, we are going to wrap it up. I'm going to hit the end button, so everybody's going to go away really quick. Thank you. You guys have a good night. Be cool. Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.